Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Cool. Cool. So this is the intro to web design. I am John Whiting. I have been at UC for a few years now. I am a computer science major, and I have been on all my co-ops. I will be graduating in May, and most of my co-op experience has revolved around web development. And that includes several different stacks like JavaScript, Python, so on and so forth. So today we're kind of going to be going over all of those different stacks or general utilities that you might use for web development. So to start off with, what exactly is web development? Now that is a little bit of a loaded question because web development encompasses so many things. You could think of Netflix, for example, or Amazon.com. Those are all types of web applications. It is mostly anything that revolves around some kind of interactivity using the internet. Specifically, there are two general types of web development. There is the front-end development and the back-end development. Front-end development is focused more around the user experience and what they are going to interact with, such as a website or a web application. When you are using Discord or the Microsoft Teams app, you're actually using a front-end application that is designed around the web. Likewise, there is also the backend. Now, the backend is a little bit different, where the user doesn't interact with it per se directly. They instead interact with it through the front end. So the backend has responsibilities for stuff like user authentication and data access from secured locations and authorization, that kind of thing. So in this diagram that you can see, the front end is something you would use on your tablet or your laptop or your computer. And then you would use that to interact with some kind of backend, which is usually centrally hosted. It can include any number of different languages and backends. And that backend would then interact with the database or other kind of services you might be using, such as Redis or Postgres, other APIs, email servers, that kind of thing. Oftentimes you will hear the term full stack developer, which is someone who works on both front end and back end applications. So to kind of get started here, we're going to go over front end frameworks, and there are a lot of them. There's a meme out there that there's a new JavaScript framework every day, which is partially true. So I picked some of the most commonly used ones, and we're going to talk about them a little bit. So when it comes to front-end frameworks, you're not left with much of a choice. You're going to be using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. There's not very many other ways to do it. There are some other languages that can compile down, but they still usually are based around HTML and CSS. All 6 of the front-end frameworks I have chosen to pluck out are based around JavaScript, and each one have their own different quirks. The most famous one is probably React, and React uses what's called JSX templating. It is a pseudo standard that allows people to create reusable components and other kinds of HTML snippets, CSS snippets, JavaScript snippets, so on and so forth, to be reused all over different applications. Solid.js is kind of like a mind child of React, kind of. It heavily is inspired by what React did, except its exact details for how it does it are a little bit different, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Same thing with React. React is also inspired by React. There are some other differences that we will talk about later. Now, very different from those is Vue. Vue has its own kind of templating language that does not use JSX. And you still have the CSS, JavaScript, and HTML, and they're all typically in one file. They can be separated, but how they operate is fundamentally different, and that has to do mostly with state and DOM manipulation, how that kind of works. If Solid.js is a child of React in a way. Svelte is also a child of Vue. It is inspired heavily by Vue, but it makes its own simplifications and trade-offs with that. And then lastly, the one that's different from all the other ones would be Angular. Angular was one of the first frameworks. It was made by Google. It was very popular, and then React came in and was like, we have a better way of doing it. So the React tends to be more popular now, and Angular is not nearly as popular, but it is still around today. It is very different from how it works functionally, though. So what you might be wondering what exact framework you should use, and that really depends. If you're very inexperienced, I'd recommend something like React, where it is very easy to get into. There's a lot of libraries and other packages that are very well used. They're very famous. You can search anywhere and you'll be able to find a million different React libraries. If you're already familiar with something like React, or you don't like React, you might explore into something like Vue or Svelte. I'd recommend staying away from Angular as much as possible from my own experience. Not a big fan of that. If you're looking for speed and performance, I'd probably recommend Svelte and Solid.js. There's so many different reasons why this might be. And underneath each one of these libraries, I have a quick overview of what they entail. So React, Solid.js, and Preact all use JSX. React and Vue are based on virtual DOMs, which is the VDOM. I'm not going to get into the semantics of what the virtual DOM is compared to the actual DOM, but there are reasons why React and Vue use them, usually centered around performance. Svelte and Solid.js get around that by compiling down their instructions to something that works much better with the DOM, but does not trade off that speed, and they're much smaller. However, as we'll see a little bit later, we're going to be looking more at React than the other ones because that is the largest library currently for front-end frameworks. Now, with the backend, there are any number of possible options. If you can think of a language, there's going to be some backend framework or some other kind of library that you can use to create HTTP or related requests. So I chose a few of them that I thought were worth mentioning. A couple of these are from JavaScript, a couple of them are from Python, a couple of them are from from Rust. And this is just to show that the options are huge with what you can do. So each one has their own benefits and trade-offs. However, when it comes to picking a backend, the most important detail would be to pick something you are comfortable with. Express.js is very lightweight, very easy to use. If you're familiar with JavaScript, it's rather intuitive to jump into. The documentation is also very good, and there's a lot of support out there in general on Stack Overflow and other kind of forums. Nest.js is similar to many other JavaScript-based frameworks for web development on the back end, and that they are based on Express.js. Most popular JavaScript backend applications are based around Express.js in some way. Nest.js is just something that expands on top of that. For Python, there is Flask and Fast API. They serve two very different purposes. Flask is a little bit more complete, whereas Fast API is meant to give you a lightweight and quick startup time for your server. Fast API is similar to Express.js in terms of general syntax. It's just Python versus JavaScript. And then for the Rust packages, this is more just to show that low-level languages as well have very popular libraries to use. You can find them for C or C++ or Go, but the exact ones you use is more up to personal preference. There's a lot of support for all of these different libraries that you can always find. Very good documentation on them too. So we're going to give a little bit of a live demo. I know that part of the experience when jumping into a new technology is, well, how do I get started? And so I figured that it'd be very nice to kind of show how you might create a web application from start to finish. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be focused around React. And for React, there's a bunch of different libraries out there. One of my favorite ones to use for a quick and easy start is Next.js. And it's very easy to get started with Next.js. We can just run this npx create next app at latest command. They show it on their website. It is very easy to use. It takes you through this little interactive session where you say exactly what you want. Yeah.
I have one question. So last time I used React, I think I used React Native to build an iOS application.
Yeah.
But my device was Windows, and I had many problems actually running the code. And would it create problems when you're trying to maybe build a website with React?
Yes. It's a very good question. Yeah, so in summary, the question was about working with Windows and web applications using something like React or React Native, and will that cause problems? And the answer, short answer is yes. If you can see my screen right now, I'm using WSL. It is basically Linux inside of Windows. There's very few trade-offs using WSL. I would recommend looking into it if you were to do web development of any kind. The dark blue?
Yeah.
That one's not really needed. Yeah. I would recommend using Linux. Windows has a lot of problems when it comes to any kind of modern development in general. Stuff like C++ is usually relatively straightforward to do, especially with tools like Visual Studio. However, when you're working with like Python even or JavaScript and you're working with Node, I definitely recommend Linux because there is a lot more control over the tools you can use, and you're not kind of locking yourself into an enclosed space. This is completely free. You can install WSL.
If you want to stop by, somebody there will help you set it up. So we don't
Yes.
have to go into this all right now.
Yeah, the short answer would be to look up WSL and what it is. It can, in short, be installed with just this one command right here, WSL -- install in PowerShell. If you're running it as administrator, you can run that and it'll install it. You can always look up more documentation on that too. It's very well documented. Yeah. Or yeah, come to the IEEE office hours. That'll also help. Yes. So we're just going to keep going through this interactive terminal. It's asking if we want to use TypeScript. I do like TypeScript personally. I don't like to have untyped code. So ESLint is a linter. I like to use ESLint a lot, and they have some very good rules. Tailwind CSS I have also been using more recently. It is a very nice nice library to inline CSS styles without having to use the boilerplate. And there's a lot of compilation time stuff that it does to optimize it. So a common problem in the past was you'd have a giant CSS file with a bunch of helping classes, or you'd use like Bootstrap, for example. Tailwind kind of optimizes this by getting rid of the classes you're not using, but still offering them to you when you want to use them. So we're going to say yes to Tailwind. I always like to keep my source files in source directory, so I'm going to select yes here. And we're going to use the app router. This is a newer Next.js feature, but basically we're just going to go with all the defaults that it recommends. They have very sensible defaults. I like what they pick. So we're going to go with that. And we're going to give it a second to install it here. So it's just installing all the fundamental dependencies that we need, like TypeScript and React and the Node and all the other kind of essential packages that we'll need. And then it created a nice directory here for us called client. So we can go into that and we can work on our client from here. So I'm going to open up NeoVim. And I'm just going to open up the page.tsx file here, which has a lot of HTML code, as you can see. So this is the home page for Next.js, which you can see right here. If we open up another terminal, we can run yarn dev, and this will start the actual client application. So if we go to localhost :3000, in a second here, it should load up to the default homepage for Next.js. You can see it's compiling right here, and now we can see it. So this is what you get when you first create the Next.js application. And then, of course, you can customize it to your heart's intent. So I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller here. And then going to get rid of everything inside of main here. So let's do this. Cool. So if we go even more basic, we can have a simple hello world application. And then we can also get rid of this. And then it'll automatically hot reload, which is very nice for us. If we go back here, we can see that hello world now just shows up. We didn't restart the server or anything. With this, there is, do that. With this, there is some basic styling that comes with it, I believe, which we could see here. It comes with a black background and some other kind of nice CSS stuff. And that is all being done inside of this class name here. This is how you use Tailwind. If we get rid of that, just save that, we should be able to see some of that formatting is gone. It looks like there is probably the layout that specifies some other stuff, such as the font we are using, which is Enter. And there's some metadata here, general stuff. You can read the Next.js documentation if you're curious on the exact specifics. It's essentially just a nice all-in-one package that you can use for any kind of web application, and you don't have to run through the whole process of setting up Create React app and then adding a router to it and adding all these other kind of critical utilities that people often want. So Next.js is a very nice tool for that. Of course, if you're not familiar with React, we can create components as well. So if we go back here, we can create a, let's create it inside of here. We can just create a component right here called task list. And it's going to set up the basics of what you need. Essentially, everything in React is a functional component, or they're also classes, but nowadays they recommend to use components that are functional. So everything is a function, basically. And then from here, you can return other stuff. So if we had just a unordered list here, we can perhaps manually put in some details that we want. So maybe we have do laundry task, and what else could we have? Do the dishes, and go to the store. Okay. I'm going to ignore the errors for now. And we're just going to render this and then go back to the page. From here, we should be able to add the task list and do a little bit of auto importing there. And if we save this, we should be able to see there are our tasks. We can get rid of this hello world, or we can give it a little bit better styling. Let's do the former. Let's give it a little bit better styling. So if we go back in here and add a class name, we can just say text LG, and that should make it larger. That is a Tailwind thing. Maybe even a little bit larger than that. We can go XL. And we now have a larger hello world text. Maybe we want to say tasks that need to be completed instead. You can see that that has now changed. Do a little bit of centering here, so there's text center. Cool. And then maybe a little bit of padding as well. Just a little bit of CSS to make it look a little bit better. Cool. And then we're going to add a nice little break line above this. And we can see that we have this task list and a nice header. So the nice thing about components is that they are able to be reused in other pages, which we can show. It also lets you add abstractions that might be really nice as well. So if we go to our task list here, we can add in a type or an interface in this case for the properties that we want for this. So we can call it a task list props. And let's say we want to actually pass in what tasks we want in here. So if we think about it for a second, we can think we need an array of some kind, probably an array of strings, right? So we can have an array of strings as the properties, and then we can have it so we do our task list props and create some tasks from this. So if we take a look at this, we should see that tasks is an array. And so we're being told that is array. We can see that there's the map function and add, and we can see that the signature says that it should be an array of type string, which is very nice. Now, part of the advantage of JSX is that we can use JavaScript right inside of our HTML. And you do that using these curly braces. So if we just go through here and say tasks, and then we map them to something, and we can put in a component in here if we want. So I'm actually going to do this a little bit different. I'm going to use parentheses instead. And we're going to do that same thing as before, where we had the li tag, and then we're going to put the exact task. So this first argument that's passed here is going to be the task, which is the string from above here. And if we add that in here, we can just put task in like that. Here's that missing key. So it's also going to want a key. For the key, we can just reuse the task. We'll save that real quick. Cannot read properties of undefined map. So that will be from this page here. We can see that we're now getting a warning, a nice little warning that says tasks is missing for this. So we need to define tasks. And in React, you define properties using this notation where you say what it is. So it's the task property. And then you can say equals and then something. Now we want this to be an array of strings. So we can have a, I'm going to put it in here for now. We will see why later. If we just have a nice array here of tasks, we can have the same thing as before, do laundry, do dishes, and go to the store. And then we can just pass those tasks into here. If we save that, we can now see the same exact stuff as before. It's just all being rendered from this one list now. So you can start to see the power of what something like React gives you that normal JavaScript doesn't. We can just give something an array and it can render something that we want to be rendered very nicely, very easily. And if we want to change it, we can just change it in one spot and it'll update everything else accordingly. So we can see that I just added that to the list. Now this also empowers us to work with something like state, which just lets us update it in real time. So this is what will provide the reactivity that a lot of people are familiar with. So in React, a lot of it's based around this onChange principle. And onChange takes a function where whenever the input changes, something will happen. We can do that if we want it to update live. We can also do something where we have a button that on submit, it does something. And so for this task list, we can worry about the on submit part. So I'm going to define a function in here that will be add task. And to that, we will provide the string that we want. Change the mind. We're not going to do the string we want. We will use the state instead. And we will have this be a callback. In React, there's these things called hooks. And hooks are important for a lot of reasons for why React kind of gives the juice that it needs. It lets you have state, and it lets you have stuff that updates when that state changes. And that's where like the use callback or use memo comes in. The React documentation for that is very good. I'd recommend it if you want to learn more about the specific ones. The most important ones, though, are use state, use memo, and use callback. We're going to update this tasks now to be a use state instead. It will default to this array, and it will give us a tuple of our tasks and then some way to set our tasks. So if we have that, we will also need to import use state. It's not being found. Import use state. Cool. Oh, it's already found. So this is also something with Next.js. It thinks it is a server component, so we'll specify that it's a client component here instead. And then we will worry about the add tasks here. So as part of that state, we also will need a new task to be added and set new task. This will be a string, and this will be what comes from our input. So our onChange will go here, and onChange we will set, I believe we get an argument here, it's an event. Target dot value, and we will set the new task to this. This is just because we're using a raw input in HTML. It gives us an event on change, whereas a lot of UI libraries like Material UI or Ant Design is another pretty popular one, will oftentimes do this for you. The onChange will just give you a string or a string array or a number, whatever you might want. But since we're using the vanilla HTML input, we have to do this event target value instead. And that will basically just update our new task here. So part of the add task then will be to update the current tasks. And in React, we want to think about it in a way that is functional, because with this whole concept of state, you want to worry about how it changes, not necessarily what it should be right now. So when we're talking about old tasks, we want to use the old tasks and then add this additional new task onto it. So we have to use a function inside of the set tasks, which will let us take in the old tasks and then do something to that. So we will start off by creating a new array. You would think that you could just take tasks, for example, and just push something into it. However, because of how React state works, it won't know to update it then. So we have to update it using the set function instead. So if we update old tasks with the new task, we can also just add in the dependencies here. We will need a new task dependency for this function. And then down below here in our onSubmit, we can add in our task. And I believe this should be functionally what we need to start off with. So now we go back here, we can see now we have an input. Oh, we don't have anything for the button. So for the button, we just need to say something. So we're going to say add task. And now we have a button that says add task right there. So if we say there's some nice default styling going on. You give it a class name of text, I think is default. For Slate, let's just do Slate 800. There we go. So we can say what the task is that we want to do. So we just put in test, click add task. We do not see it do anything. Why is that? Unchange. So something you can also do a lot of times for debugging is just add a console log. Very common to do. So add a console log for the new task here. Oh. Oh, I have caps lock on. There we go. So we go to our console, we should be able to see that test is in fact working and nothing happens when that happens. Okay. So we will also just add in a console login here, new task. And this will be the new task that we want to add. So we can kind of see that in the printout. And we can see that's not showing up there. So, that's because this is not on submit. This should be on click. That is my bad. That should be on click. We had test here. There we go. Okay. So we can see that as we go through, we can add new stuff without having to actually change the underlying code, which is a very nice thing that's usually very difficult to do with vanilla JavaScript. So whenever you look something up, this will often be the example you see where you add a task list. It's the most common way to show off how state works in React, and it's a very nice thing to do. Now, another good thing about React is the ability to use it with other things like a backend, for example, as we talked about earlier. So let's say you wanted to add this task list to the server side, and that could let you have persistent storage. So if we just refresh right here, we will see that all those tasks that we added were gone. We have the default ones, but we don't have the ones that we added after that. And if we wanted those to stay, then we have to have something to keep them around. And since this is only on my machine, we could use something like local storage. However, if you want everyone to, like if I wanted Elaine or this computer or anyone else to also see the same tasks that I do, you want some kind of central place for them to be stored. So that would be the server. And so we can kind of transition over into working on the server then. And for the server, we can use Express.js. So I just have some commands here to copy. Basically, npm init will say that I'm starting a JavaScript application or package here. And I was going to let all the defaults be there. If you want to change something, you can. Like you want to say for the author, you put yourself. Entry point might be a little bit different. We're going to just do that for now. And then we're going to install 3 packages. The first one is Express itself. So that will let us use Express for the application. And since I like to use TypeScript, I'm also going to add TS node. That will let us use TypeScript files directly and not have to worry about going from a TypeScript file, compiling it down to a JavaScript file, and then running the JavaScript file. We can just run the TypeScript file itself. And since we're using TypeScript, we're also going to add in the types for Express. A lot of the older applications don't come with the types already included in the package. So you have to add in this @types and then the package name. It's very common that this is a syntax that you have to use to add types for a specific package. So we're going to add that in, and we can see that those work just fine. And we can see that we also created this node modules folder, which contains all of that stuff. Cool. So now we can actually worry about the application itself. So I'm going to create an index.ts file here. And in this is where we're going to put all of our necessary details. So we're going to first import Express from Express. And then we're going to set up the app for it. And this is general boilerplate for Express. If you go to their website, you'll see mostly this exact same thing. We're also going to make the port customizable. I'm going to set it to 8,000 for now. That's only because by default, they usually recommend 3,000, but our client's running on 3,000. So if we were to have the client and server running on 3,000, it wouldn't be able to bind properly, and we wouldn't know which one we're trying to talk to. From there, we have some of this other stuff. So if you want to work with JSON, which is very nice if you want to work with the front end for it, because a JSON object is already usable in TypeScript like you normally would for any other kind of state. So we can not add const. We can app.use, and then Express has this JSON that you can call, and it is a function call itself that this kind of acts as a middleware that will let you accept and transmit JSON nicely. And then everything in React kind of follows, or sorry, not React, Express follows this general .get structure. If you're getting to like a larger application, you're probably not going to be using the .get anymore, and you probably expand into routers, which Express also supports. Their documentation around that is also very good. So this also like can be .post, it can be delete, any kind of the standard HTML, or sorry, the HTTP protocol action. So there's get, post, delete, update, put. All those different ones can be used in different ways. So we're going to use get for now, and we can just have it be at the root directory, or not the root directory, the root path, which is a slash. And then from there, it takes in a function, which we'll go over in a second. And that's it. So the function is what gets called when someone navigates to this specific URL, this path. So if we want, we can have the request and the response. So Express is also very functional, where everything revolves around these two parameters of this function. And if you want to return something to the client, you can use .send or one of the other helping functions for that, like .json, which we'll go over in a little bit. And from here, we can just give it a hello world string. If we say that, we can ignore, oh, we also forgot one important thing. This last bit at the bottom is just a little bit of copy paste. It's the thing that actually starts our Express.js application. Up here, we're defining what it looks like. And down below is where we actually are running the application. So if we go ahead and we start this now. One other thing, we need to modify the package JSON just so we can use it nicely. So we can add in this dev script like we had it before, so we can run yarn dev. And this is just going to run ts node index.tsx. Sorry, just .ts. And now we should be able to run yarn dev. Cool. So now we can see that it is listening on port 8000. And if we go to localhost :8000, boom, we can see that there's the hello world that we said before. Now, one of the nice advantages of Express is, like I said, the JSON capabilities that it has, and it's also very lightweight. So if we wanted to add in a JSON endpoint, I should say just JSON for now, we can add in the same thing as before, but instead of sending just a string back, we can send a JSON blob back. So this JSON blob back, we can also feed it a regular object. So in this case, we have foo, we can say bar, or hello world test 1 2 3. Whatever the data looks like, you can give it to it as a JavaScript object. And then you can also customize the status code if you want. So by default, everything defaults to 200, which is the OK inside of HTML. I'm sorry, HTTP. There's also like 404, which a lot of people are familiar with, page not found. There's 403, which I believe is unauthorized. 401, I think is unauthenticated or something along those lines. But we're just going to go with 200 for now. And if we go back here, no, I don't remember if we need to restart or not. Yeah, we will need to restart the application. This does not have hot reloading. There are ways of adding hot reloading to an Express.js application, but we'll ignore that for now because that's a little bit more involved with setup. But if we restart that, we can now see, well, Firefox is a little bit of help there for us, but it gives us a nice JSON string back. We can see that there's the foo bar, the hello world, and the test 1 2 3. And then if you're using Firefox, it adds this nice little render to it as well, which is very nice. If we were to go back to the homepage, you can see there's the hello world. And if we were to add in this same thing as before. Let's go down here. If we were to add in the JSON here instead, and we were to restart the server, oh, it also picks it up. So it is a little bit smart there. I believe that is because we're using the middleware up above here. If we were not using that, I think it would just try to show a string or might even error out. But you can always use the .json function on the response call to do that. So we can use an Express.js backend to work with the tasks. So if we were to have, for example, /get tasks and work with the whole rec-res, we can also have the tasks stored here. And we can also have those defaults as before. So the do homework, go to the store. We'll start with those. We can just have it return those tasks. Not return. We can have the JSON send it back as just a regular array. And so if we restart the server again, we can see, and go to /tasks. We can see there's the do homework and the go to store. And so now we would actually be able to use this on the front end. So if we go back to our front end application here, I just realized I was using very small text. Go back to our front end application. We can modify how this works to instead do a fetch request. And so we're going to put this inside of a use effect, which is another React hook, also somewhat important. It basically will run whenever something inside of its dependencies here updates. If you put nothing, it'll just run once when it first mounts. Inside of here, we're going to have it do a fetch request, and we're going to have it fetch from HTTPS, not HTTPS, just HTTP, localhost 8000, and then we're just going to have it console log that for now so we can see what it looks like. Specifically, let's do the tasks endpoint. And running an error. We refresh real quick. Yes, there's course policies. So in general, you might see this a lot when it happens. Essentially, it comes down to we're running the application on localhost 3000, but we're trying to access localhost 8000. And that's called a cross-origin request. And the cross-origin request security cores is something that blocks it from accepting traffic that's not otherwise approved. So this helps prevent attacks of different calibers, where you might have someone pretending to be your application. And let's say someone was to build a fake Amazon and they were trying to access the real Amazon API, they would have problems running the actual queries for it and showing it because CORS blocks it from doing so. Now, Express.js does have a way around this using CORS. It's a middleware that I believe comes standard. Oh, no, you have to install it as well. So if we add it to our server here, we can add npm CORS, then we can go up above and we can import CORS from CORS. And then we just use it the same way we use any other Express.js middleware. We use app.use and then whatever it is. So app.use CORS. And then I think we're going to have to configure it to allow in any traffic for now. It's just simpler that way. So we see the origin here. That's what we need. So we go here and we say origin. This can just be star for any. And then try saving that and then running the yarn dev again. It does have an issue. Can't find the types for it. That's what I mentioned before, where the at types comes in handy because a lot of these default packages do not come with types. So add that real quick, and then we can run yarn dev again. Cool. Now it's happy. So now, if we go back here, we should still be able to see the tasks. Cool. And if we refresh here, hopefully we get a little bit better looking. Yep, so here we go. Down here at the bottom, we can see here's the response, and it has all the stuff that is essential to it, but we can see we queried the URL, which was localhost 8000 tasks. It did some core stuff, and then there's the body and the headers. And the headers, it just says that it's JSON basically. This is just what a standard request looks like to the backend. So now inside of here, on the client side, we can go through and actually change what we do now. And so with this fetch, we should have the response here. And then with the response, we can do something. So we care about the JSON from it, I believe. And if we console log this, we should be able to see some more stuff here. So it's still in a pending state, which means I believe this needs to have the async here, and then we call it await. And we let it rebuild it again. There we go. So now we can see that we actually have our do homework and go to the store that we saw from before on the back end. And so what we can do with this is we can say we have our JSON body, which we get by awaiting the response JSON. And then we can do set tasks to whatever the JSON body is, because it's exactly what we want. And we can just say get rid of all of our state inside of here, because we don't want it anymore. We now want to work on the back end. So we can see that there's the do homework and go to the store. And that's right from the backend itself, which is pretty cool. That's something that we can do where we query the backend and we get something. And so now it would be possible to come back here onto the server and do something like app.post to tasks and go through and modify exactly what we want and save it. So we can just have it as 201 is typically what you do for create. And we'll just say that. And then we can go ahead and we can also say JSON tasks will just return the new tasks upon it changing. And then we can update tasks here to add in whatever is in the response or the request JSON and or things with body. And then whatever the field is, so this should be name. And we can go through and basically this will update the task list here. And then whenever someone queries this tasks endpoint, it would give them the new tasks instead. Now we are running out of time a little bit, so I won't be able to show that per se, but it's something that you could, try out on your own to get it to save on the server side as well. And then come back here and you can have it so whenever you go through here now, it'll actually submit it to the backend instead, so that when you refresh, whatever you just added as a task there will still be there, basically. So do a little bit of a wrap up here. That is the intro to web development. So are there any questions that anyone might have about anything that they saw, or any kind of recommendations that they might want for what kind of tools to use or anything like that? No one has any questions, then I think we'll be able to end pretty soon. So I'll hang around for a little bit afterwards. I'm also in the IEEE Discord. So if you find me in there, you can message me and I can help with stuff. Also, IEEE office hours, there's usually a lot of people in there. Several of them are experienced in web development. So if you want, special advice or, to your own specific project, people are willing to help you give that. So yeah, if there are no other questions, I think we can call it good for today. Cool. Well, thank you, everyone.